It's not exactly warm where our next guest is. Either he's down in Mobile, Alabama at the Senior Bowl today. My man Emory Hunt, follow him on Twitter at FBallGamePlan for all your NFL draft, and college football analysis. And he joins me now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Emory, how many warm clothes have you worn that you did not expect to wear this week?
You know what? I always pack the same week because I've been on the road since January 4th. So it's been a long month, and when I always get to Mobile, it reminds me of back in Jersey because it's never warm, it's never hot, it's always brisk. So throughout the week it's been about 55 degrees with maybe a low of 38 at night. So it's kind of reminding me of the Northeast anytime I come here, which also reminds that I'm on my way back home.
So let's talk about some of the guys down there. You know, we first got to start with all the conversation about the quarterbacks because, you know, everyone keeps raving about Jarrett Stidham, but whenever I saw Jarrett Stidham play this year, he did not look that good. But on the flip side, you have a guy like Will Grier, a guy who most of the year was a Heisman Trophy candidate, but yet he's looked very inconsistent in practice this week. So how much can this Senior Bowl game today have an impact on these quarterback stocks?
I think it gives you a clearer picture on guys that can actually play well versus guys that actually practice well. And that's one of the biggest things you always want to remember when you're watching All-Star games. Some guys practice really well. Some guys don't practice well. Some guys are gamers. Some guys are not. So you can't let 1 week, 3 days of practice supersede 4 to 5 years of game film on these prospects. You have to keep it in perspective that maybe so-and-so is having a good week, maybe so-and-so is having a bad week. But overall, when you add this as a small piece of the overall evaluation, you don't want to lose sight of what an all-star game is and what it's supposed to be.
You know, one of the comments I saw this week as well is, you know, at one point Daniel Jones was standing next to Trace McSorley, and I forget who tweeted this out, but they said that, you know, Daniel Jones next to Trace McSorley looked like a college senior standing next to a high school freshman. And I think that, yeah, physically one guy may look more superior than the other, but, you know, how many times do we see that when it comes to scouting and when it comes to evaluating talent, Emory, that some of these executives, the reason why they lose jobs is because they focus more on the guy's physical look than their actually ability to play football.
And if you put Kyler Murray next to those two, he's going to look like a middle schooler. So we know Kyler Murray is the better quarterback out of the three. But I will put this on my headstone. I will wear big T-shirts and wear it around proudly. Size is not a skill. If you're good enough, you're big enough. So you have to look at how a guy plays and how he plays consistently, especially in the big moments. That tells you all you need to know. So if guys are just focusing on what players can actually do, rather than the height, weight, speed measurables, just focus on how the guy plays in conjunction with everyone around him, and it tells you all you need to know.
Emory Hunt joining me on the Boardwalk Honda hotline on 97.3 ESPN live from Mobile, Alabama. I got to ask you about the two South Jersey kids who are down there today. It's a very cool thing for South Jersey. Two kids who I covered when I was calling high school football games. You got Raquel Armstead and Wes Hills, two young men who are getting a lot of NFL looks. So give the audience a little idea about what those guys have looked like down there, because I know a lot of people in this area want to know how the South Jersey kids are looking.
They're looking real good, man. Both guys epitomize that South Jersey mantra. They can run the football real well. They're tough. They're physical runners. They do a great job of powering through contact. Wes Hills caught the football really well this week, and I think that was a big question for him. And Raquel Armstead is a guy that had a solid week of work and did a good job in 9-on-17 periods, and he also caught the football well. So I'm excited to see how both guys play out during this particular game here today. And that will tell you a lot of what you can expect of these guys moving forward from a holistic point of view.
You know, you played the running back position, and Wes Hills is a guy who's gotten, you know, a little overlooked a bit because he didn't go to, a big-time SEC Big Ten school. But he was a guy, he was extremely productive at Wildwood. I mean, he was carrying that team in so many games, and he seemed to do the same thing over at Slippery Rock.
Yeah, and people forget about him at Delaware. He was a good player at Delaware, so he just didn't pop up on the scene. And, you know, whatever happened at Delaware forced him to go and move on to Slippery Rock, and I'm glad he went there because, one, he's at a premier program in Division II in a premier conference. of Division II in the PSAC, and so he's playing against top competition, and he did the same thing he did at Delaware and the same thing he did in high school. So if he's doing it across many different platforms and many different schools and uniforms over many different years, that tells you that he's pretty good carrying the football.
And then Raquel Armstead, he's one of my favorite stories. You know, most people don't know this, but, you know, he was sitting behind a guy who was one of the All-Americans as a 8th grader in high school, in Rob Ennis. And then when Rob Ennis had issues off the field, Armstead stepped in. His first game as a starter, he only runs it for over 200 yards, establishes himself. What happens? He goes to Temple. He's sitting behind another group of guys, and slowly but surely, he kept building his way up. And this year, he had a very, very productive season with those 13 rushing touchdowns.
I always liked what I saw from Armstead when he was playing behind Jahad Thomas at Temple, who was another North Jersey guy, played at Elizabeth. And it was good to see him make the most of his reps when he got the chance. And you just saw that, okay, when this guy becomes a full-time ball carrier, he's going to be super productive. Now, he had some injuries this past year at Temple, but with a clean bill of health and with him getting those full slate of feature back carries, that's exactly what you want to see. So he's been as good as advertised, and I'm glad he's having a really good week down here in Mobile.
For those people who are NFC East fans, Eagle fans, Giant fans, even Cowboy and Redskin fans, all 4 teams had a lot of injuries, and some of those injuries were on the offensive line. So tell the audience about some of the guys who are going to be playing at the Senior Bowl to keep an eye on who are offensive linemen.
Well, keep an eye on Dalton Reisner out of Kansas State, really good offensive lineman, one of the premier players in this bowl game. Ross Pierce-Bacher from Alabama was outstanding in one-on-ones all week. And one of my favorite prospects so far in this draft class is Chris Lindstrom, the guard out of Boston College. I thought he was phenomenal each and every day at practice. And I would also give a shout-out to 2 other guys that did really well out here in Mobile, and that's Eldon Jenkins from Mississippi State and also Titus Howard out of Alabama State, who only gave up 1 sack in his collegiate career. And he came to Alabama State as a walk-on quarterback / tight end, grew into an offensive lineman, and became one of the best in the country.
One of the guys who's gotten a lot of rave reviews down there this week has been David Sills. Crazy story himself getting to where he is now, and apparently there's a lot of people in the media and NFL scouts who really liked what they saw from him at practice this week.
Well, he's been good as advertised, as well as his teammate Gary Jennings, the other receiver from West Virginia. Sills has that sneaky acceleration where you like his speed on the inside, like it's one of those bigger inside F receivers, not necessarily a slot guy, but you want him running down the seam against that safety and try to get that safety one-on-one in a bind. You can also see him as a flanker where you're going to put him on the move and allow him a free release, and that's where I think he's most effective. So, yes, he has had a really good weekend. As always, you want to see how these guys do going full speed in the game.
We've heard a lot about how this is a deep defensive line draft. I'm going to ask you a bit of a controversial question, and that is Montez Sweat overrated, or is he the real deal?
I think he's a real deal. He's been a real deal to me since he got on campus. Him and Jeffrey Simmons, his teammate at Mississippi State, both guys are just tremendous defensive linemen. And Sweat is a guy whose process may not look as clean or as technically sound as many, but it's effective. And that's all you really ask for. We talked about trusting the tape and trusting the film. Sweat's film is phenomenal. His week out here has echoed those sentiments throughout the practices.
Yeah, see, the thing with Sweat is you mentioned Simmons. I was always wondered, is Sweat productive because he's got a great guy on the other side, or was he always productive because he himself was a force of nature? Like Ed Oliver at Houston, there's nobody else in that D line. So when he's making big plays, it's him. Sometimes it's hard to tell, especially in the SEC with all that talent. Is the guy great because of him, or is the guy great because he's got great talent around him and it leaves him more one-on-one opportunities?
Both things can be true. You can be great in your own right and also great because you get great help. So if he wasn't as productive, despite having Jeffrey Simmons right there, then we could have some serious questions about what Sweat brought to the table, what he brings to the table. But because he was great, in addition to someone else being great, that tells you all you need to know about his talents.
Who else on the defensive side of the ball are you telling people, look, you better watch out for this guy because this guy does not just have a good game, but he could also rise up the draft boards?
Lonnie Johnson Jr. out of Kentucky. The 4 All-Star games I've been at this January, it's funny, all 4 have had Kentucky corners that are tall. In the College Gridiron Showcase and also the Tropical Bowl, it was Chris Westry, who's a 6'4", 198-pound cornerback from Kentucky. The name of the guy at the Shrine Game slips my mind right now, but he was also 6'3", and Lonnie Johnson is 6'3", 206. All this length on the back end at Kentucky. Lonnie Johnson was out here doing a great job in locking up receivers, playing with the length, showing the fluidness of a guy that's 5'9". So keep an eye on a cornerback from Kentucky. He could be a high riser.
So now after this game is done, tell the folks out there what is next for a lot of these young guys in their next step in the process, because there's going to be a whole month before they get to the combine.
Well, that's all it is. They're going to be training heavily for the combine, prepping for the workouts, prepping for the interviews, prepping for the whiteboard. So it's going to be nonstop combine prep for these guys, and also, most importantly, getting healthy, getting treatment, so that way when they do get to Indy, they can hit the ground running, figuratively and literally.
And, of course, all the coverage, you can check it out at F-Ball Game Plan on Twitter. Emory Hunt, he's down there in Alabama. He's thoroughly covering the NFL draft, leading you up. Emory, appreciate your time. I know you got the game this afternoon. I appreciate your time out of your day. We'll be catching up soon.
Appreciate you, man. Thanks for having me on.